My name is Ursula Franke. I work for the Endangered Wildlife Trust. And then I also have some support from my MTPA stewardship colleagues here today, so I'm very glad to see them here this year. My talk will be about Chrissiesmeer and developing the management plan for the protected environment. This is the area that we're looking at, the black line that you can see, sort of creating a very rough circle, is the catchment boundary of the Chrissiesmeer area, as we now call it. And the whole Chrissiesmeer area is higher on the Highveld than the surrounding area, if that makes sense. So it functions very much like a water tower. All the lakes and pans are on the inside, over 330 of them, all draining inwards, and then due to this water tower effect, all the rivers originate around this area, and that includes the Komati catchment, the Vaal catchment, and the Usutu. So from a water perspective, it's a very important area, and very unique as well. Conservation importance includes, it's the highest concentration of seasonal and permanent lakes and pans in South Africa. It's a freshwater ecosystem priority area, a proposed Ramsar site. We're not quite there yet. And then because of this freshwater habitat mostly, it's very important for water birds. At times we have over 20,000 birds in the area, and then also for a whole list of other threatened species, not just the birds. Just to give you a quick feel for the area, I mentioned 330 pans, what they look like. There's some snapshots. We have 3 different types. So your open water or your sedge pans, your reed pans like the middle one, and then some saline pans as well. The Chrissiesmeer Protected Environment was declared under the National Environmental Management Protected Areas Act in January of this year. And it is just under 60,000 hectares and have 63 landowners that agreed voluntarily to sign their land up to this protected environment status. It's a working landscape, and therefore we took the protected environment status and not the higher formal one of nature reserve, because the area must still continue as it is, providing a living for all the people living in this catchment. And because of this, the collective management of the area is very important. It's not just the landowners as such, but also the communities living there. So everybody must work together if we want to make this area look the way we want to. So, management challenges. Obviously, the first one, large number of landowners to get together. Working with landowners is a little bit like herding cats, and if you need to get 63 together in one room, it keeps you on your toes. Then other management issues are more general things that you get in most such areas, including your grazing pressure, fire management, alien invasive plants, especially wattles in our area. And then another concern that we have, especially in the Chrissiesmeer area, because it's a closed system, is pesticide runoff from your agricultural lands into these systems that cannot flush. So in a nutshell, our management plan for Chrissiesmeer needs to look at this. It needs to look at a large group of diverse land users to collectively manage a production landscape for conservation. And all those words that I highlighted are the things that we need to keep in mind when we work at writing this management plan and implementing it finally. Just to give you a snapshot, this is part of a wetland system in the northern part of the Chrissiesmeer protected environment. Grass owls, cranes, and other threatened species use this wetland for breeding purposes. And if we want to look at the management of this area, where you can see the agricultural lands, some wattle infestations there on your left, your right, then looking at the farm boundaries intersecting this system, immediately, just for this bit, you have to work collectively with 8 landowners. And their management practices will all influence this stretch of the system. So it really, you need to look holistically at the picture. What is the purpose of a management plan for a protected environment? these 4 points to me was the most important. Firstly, it needs to provide a tool to guide and ensure consistency of the management of the area. It needs to provide a policy framework and appropriate program of action. It must build accountability through monitoring and auditing, especially in an area this big, where there's also a lot of partners involved. This becomes very important. And it must provide for capacity building. So, for Chrissiesmeer, we are currently writing the draft management plan. We are a little bit behind in the process, so we need to step up a bit to get it done in time. But what we've realized up to this stage in the process is, firstly, consultation is critically important. A lot of landowners are involved. There's also quite a bit of partners involved in the whole process, and you need to, from the start, have a process where you can include all their opinions and their needs in the management plan. Then the plan must also be practical and executable. It doesn't help if you have a handbook with wonderful ideas and you can't really use it on the ground. Roles and responsibilities are very important, and then also to keep this landscape perspective, because we're working within a catchment that we would like to conserve and manage in a certain way. So this was taken during a workshop held with the landowners a couple of months ago. It was facilitated by somebody from the Department of Agriculture, which was a great help because he could speak the language, literally and figuratively. And he got inputs from the landowners that he then compiled and put into the management plan for us. Now, what we asked the landowners were two things. The first one was inputs in terms of values. So why do you need values for a management plan? Values are linked to the attributes that exemplify the area and that are the reason for the proclamation in the first place. And it also forms a theme that runs through the management plan in the end. So what did the Chrissiesmeer landowners come up with in terms of their values? 1, respect for each other and care for the environment. Seek knowledge to take informed decisions. Honesty and integrity. And focus on conserving biodiversity and living in harmony with people and the environment. So it sounds wonderful, and it links very well back to the purpose of the management plan. The second thing that we asked input from the landowners was around the situational analysis. And here I must once again state that we asked them specifically to not just look and think about their property, but to look at a landscape level and think, when they answer the questions, think about the catchment as a whole, what they see around them, not just their properties. So we identified threats, and that was under categories such as soil, water, biodiversity, etc. And then we looked at causes, current response, future recommended response, and monitoring indicators to monitor the implementation of the management actions. I have 2 examples for you that I drew from the draft management plan. The one is the threat identified as loss of wetland function, and the landowners had the causes as overutilization of wetland areas, annual burning of wetland areas, and ploughing into wetland zones. They felt that under the current response, practices are changing. People are becoming more aware of what is good and bad and correct and not so correct, and they are changing what they are doing on the ground. And another response is that Working for Wetlands have identified the area for rehabilitation, and they will start work now in 2015. Then they said future recommended response or action was wetland health assessments to be done on these wetland systems, to prioritise areas for intervention and more environmental awareness. And the monitoring indicators, the hectares of wetland rehabilitation done after each year, and wet health scores for these wetlands that you can do each year and follow up and see whether there's an improvement. The second example is the impact of agriculture on pans, so quite specific for this area. And the causes, the farmers said, firstly, overutilization of the surrounding areas, so that's mostly to do with grazing. And then the second one, herbicide runoff from agricultural lands. Current response is none. And the future recommended response they mentioned was the increase of a buffer zone around each plan, and also wet health assessments. We worked with Mondi Wetland Program to sort of adapt your wet health assessment, that you can use it on plans as well. And then monitoring indicators, your wet health scores each year, and water quality analysis. Now, taking your management plan and bringing it down to individual farm level is where the annual plans of operation come in. That includes land use mapping and zonation, where farmers have to specify where they're going to do what in their properties. And then the annual auditing obviously comes after that, where you can check whether the management plan is being implemented correctly or how well. Next steps in the process, we need to have a second workshop with the land users as soon as we have the first draft completed, to get their final inputs and see that they are happy. They are the management authority for this area. So they need to be happy with the management plan that we give to them, and because they need to implement the actions. Then the MEC can sign off on the management plan, and then obviously the implementation can start, which is the big part. Concurrently, we're also working with MTPA. They're driving the process to expand the protected environment as it is at the moment. Roughly 2/3 are under protection now, but we would like to get the entire catchment under conservation status. Then finally, key points, where we are now in the process. As I have mentioned, landscape approach. This is the largest protected environment in Mpumalanga, in South Africa, I think, as far as I have it. So it's very new to work at this level with this number of landowners, and we need to always keep in mind why we're doing it and at what type of level we are working towards for this. Then buy-in from the land users is critical. If you work with a large group of people and they all have to manage this area correctly as a group, you really need to get them on board as soon as possible, and as much as possible, and incorporate their ideas into what you are writing. Then from a conservation side, I think it's also, we're realizing more and more that it's important for us to have a phased approach to changing management practices. Even though we have very dedicated landowners and farmers in that area, as you saw from the values that they come up with, even if they have the right ideas, it's still going to take quite a bit of time for them to slowly adapt and get used to different ways of doing things. And we, as conservationists, need to keep that in mind. And then lastly, to keep on looking at opportunities to add value. This is a working landscape, so people still want to make a living from agriculture, a little bit of tourism, but mostly agriculture in the area. And we need to add value to the landowners, but also to the communities living in the area. And that's something that we are working with partners to see how we can address, not necessarily in the management plan, but as a project working in the area. That's it. Thank you.